Welcome back to Terrifying Stories. Before we dive in, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if you want to support this channel and go even deeper, the Patreon link is in the description and the pinned comment below. Now, let's get into it. I started camping alone after my divorce because I could not stand being inside my apartment on weekends. The silence in that place felt heavy. Every room reminded me of routines that no longer existed. I spent most evenings staring at my phone or television without paying attention to either. Camping gave me something physical to focus on. Packing gear, driving long distances, setting up a tent, cooking over a stove. Small tasks helped clear my head. By the third year, I had gotten comfortable being by myself in remote places. I stopped choosing crowded campgrounds and started looking for isolated spots on public land. I liked hearing wind in the trees instead of generators and music from nearby families. I liked waking up with no sounds except birds and distant water. The trip happened in late October of 2022 in northern Idaho. I picked the area because I had camped there once years earlier with friends. There were old logging roads running through national forest land and dozens of pull-off campsites near a long reservoir. Most people avoided the area after summer because temperatures dropped hard at night. That was exactly why I wanted to go. I left home before sunrise on a Friday and drove nearly 8 hours. The farther north I got, the emptier the roads became. Small gas stations, old diners, rusted trailers sitting behind trees. Clouds stayed low all afternoon, covering the mountains. By the time I reached the forest roads, the temperature had dropped enough that patches of old snow still sat in shaded ditches. The road into the forest was rougher than I remembered. My truck bounced over washouts and loose stone for nearly 40 minutes before I found a clearing near the water. The site sat above the reservoir on a flat stretch of dirt surrounded by tall pines. There was an old fire ring made from broken rocks and blackened cans scattered near the trees. Nobody had been there recently. Tire tracks were faded and partially covered with fallen needles. The place felt perfect. I parked near the edge of the clearing and spent the next hour setting up camp before dark. My tent faced the water through a break in the trees. I gathered dead branches, filtered water from a small stream nearby, and cooked canned chili on a propane stove. The cold came fast once the sun disappeared behind the hills. By 6:30, the entire forest had turned black except for the pale reflection of clouds over the reservoir. That first night felt peaceful. I sat beside the fire wearing gloves and a heavy jacket while the wind moved through the trees above me. Every now and then I heard splashes from the shoreline below. Probably fish, maybe beavers. Nothing unusual. Around 10, I crawled into my sleeping bag and fell asleep almost immediately. Something woke me a few hours later. At first, I thought it was the wind. Then I realized I was hearing footsteps on loose gravel outside the tent. I stayed completely still inside the sleeping bag. The footsteps were slow and uneven, not animal sounds. Boots. The person moved around the campsite for maybe 20 seconds before stopping. I listened hard, waiting for another sound. But the forest had gone silent. Even the wind seemed lighter. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I reached for the pistol I kept beside my sleeping bag. I always carried one while camping alone, mostly because of animals, though I had never needed it before. I clicked off the safety and waited. Another crunch of gravel came from near my truck. I checked my phone. No signal. The screen said 2:14 a.m. The footsteps moved again, circling slowly. Whoever it was seemed careful. I heard movement near the cooler outside, then silence again. At that point, I told myself it could be another camper who wandered into the wrong site at night. Maybe someone drunk. Maybe someone checking if the site was occupied before setting up nearby. But the behavior did not feel normal. No flashlight, no engine, no voice. The footsteps eventually drifted farther away toward the trees behind my tent. I stayed awake nearly an hour after that without hearing anything else. I barely slept the rest of the night. Morning made everything feel less threatening. Sunlight always does that. I climbed out of the tent around 7 and checked the campsite carefully. My cooler had been moved about 3 feet from where I left it. One of the side compartments on my truck canopy hung open. Nothing appeared stolen. What bothered me most were the footprints. Boot prints circled the campsite in several places. Large soles with deep tread. Definitely human. The tracks led toward the woods behind camp but disappeared on rocky ground. I stood there staring at them while cold air drifted through the trees. A strong feeling told me to pack everything immediately and leave. At the same time, another part of me felt embarrassed. I kept thinking maybe I was overreacting to a harmless situation. I stayed. That decision still bothers me. The second day passed quietly. I hiked along an old logging road for a few hours and barely saw another sign of people. No vehicles. No fresh tracks. The forest looked dead for miles. Gray sky, wet earth, fallen trees covered in moss. Around midday, I found an abandoned hunting camp deeper in the woods. Torn tarp hanging from poles. Empty propane bottles. Rotting plywood nailed between trees. It looked like someone had lived there temporarily years earlier. I remember feeling uneasy standing there because the place seemed abandoned in a hurry. Cooking supplies and broken chairs still lay scattered in the mud. I headed back before dark. When I returned to my campsite, something immediately looked wrong. My folding chair had been moved closer to the fire pit. Not blown by wind. Moved. I stopped walking and scanned the trees around me. My rifle sat locked inside the truck. The pistol remained in my jacket holster. The forest looked empty, but I could feel tension building in my chest. I checked the truck again. Another compartment had been opened. Nothing missing. That almost made it worse. If somebody wanted supplies, they could have taken expensive gear easily. Instead, they kept touching things and leaving them behind. I loaded more wood into the fire pit before sunset and decided I would leave first thing in the morning. I even started packing some gear before dark to save time later. That night, I kept the fire going longer than usual because I did not want complete darkness around camp. The flames lit the nearby trees while everything beyond them stayed black. Around midnight, I heard something metallic hit the ground near my truck. I grabbed the flashlight and pointed it toward the sound. Nothing. The beam swept across trees, dirt, coolers, and brush. Empty. Then I noticed my truck canopy door hanging open again. I knew for a fact I had locked it earlier. I stepped closer while holding the flashlight in one hand and the pistol in the other. My breathing sounded too loud. The cold air burned my throat. Inside the canopy, bags had been shifted around. A toolbox sat partially open. Then I saw fresh mud smeared along the edge of the tailgate. Somebody had been inside it moments earlier. I backed away slowly and listened. At first, there was nothing. Then I heard movement uphill behind the campsite. A single footstep. I swung the flashlight toward the slope, catching trunks and branches in the beam. For half a second, I saw part of a person between the trees. Dark jacket, pale face. Then the figure disappeared farther uphill. I shouted once without thinking, demanding whoever it was to leave. No response came back. The forest swallowed the sound completely. I stayed awake the rest of the night sitting inside my truck with the doors locked. Every few hours I heard movement somewhere outside. Slow footsteps, branches cracking. Once I heard what sounded like someone running downhill before stopping abruptly near camp. At sunrise, I packed everything in less than 15 minutes. I did not even bother organizing gear properly. I just shoved equipment into bins and threw them into the truck bed. While loading the final bag, I noticed something tied to one of the trees near my tent. A strip of blue fabric. It looked torn from clothing. I walked closer and realized it had been tied deliberately into a knot around the trunk at eye level. There were 3 more pieces farther into the woods. Like markers. The feeling that hit me then was different from fear. Felt colder than that. More certain. Somebody had been watching me carefully enough to move through camp at night without making much noise, opening compartments while I slept, and marking trees near my site. I left immediately. The logging road out of the forest twisted through hills for miles. I drove faster than I should have, barely paying attention to potholes. About 20 minutes from the highway, I noticed tire tracks ahead that looked newer than mine. I followed them around a bend and suddenly saw an old white pickup parked sideways across part of the road. A man stood beside it. He wore dark clothes and looked older, maybe late 50s or 60s. Thin build, gray beard. Even from a distance something about him looked wrong. Not dangerous in an obvious movie way. Just filthy and exhausted, like somebody living outside for a long time. The truck had no license plates. I slowed but did not stop completely. The man stared directly at me without moving. One arm hung behind his back where I could not see his hand. As my truck rolled closer, I noticed blue fabric tied around the antenna of his pickup, the same color as the strips near my campsite. Every instinct told me to keep moving. I drove around the edge of the road without stopping. My tires slipped in mud near the ditch, but the truck pushed through. When I passed him, I looked over and saw him smiling. Not waving, not angry, just smiling. I kept checking the mirror expecting headlights behind me, but the pickup never moved. Once I reached the highway, I drove nearly 2 hours before pulling over at a gas station. My hands were shaking so badly I spilled coffee trying to pour it. Later that week, I called the local ranger station and reported everything. The ranger sounded more serious after I described the white pickup and the tied fabric markers. He told me they had dealt with several incidents over the years involving a transient man living illegally in the forest near seasonal campsites. Mostly theft, stalking behavior, and breaking into unattended vehicles. One hunter had reported waking up to someone standing outside his tent at night. The ranger believed the man marked occupied camps so he could find them again in darkness without using lights. A month later, I searched local news from that county and found a short article about deputies arresting a man living in an abandoned logging structure near the reservoir. Inside, they found stolen camping equipment, weapons, food, and notebooks filled with descriptions of campsites and vehicle plates. I never learned exactly what his intentions were. The article mentioned burglary and unlawful firearm possession, but nothing violent. Still, I think about how easily that trip could have ended differently if I had stepped outside the tent during the first night or stayed one more evening alone in those woods. I still camp by myself sometimes, but not in isolated places anymore. I stay near established campgrounds with other people nearby. I sleep lighter than I used to. Every unfamiliar sound outside a tent still pulls me awake instantly. The worst part is knowing none of it involved anything supernatural. No ghost story. No mystery creature hiding in the trees. Just another human being walking silently through the dark while I slept a few feet away. So I took this seasonal job clearing hiking trails up in northern Idaho, summer of 2015. Forestry work, basically. You go out with hand tools and you cut back whatever came in over winter, mark the blowdowns, that kind of thing. It was 40 miles from the nearest gas station, and I want you to have that number in your head because it matters for how isolated we actually were. There were more of us than they had cabin space for, so 3 of us ended up camping in a clearing about a quarter mile from the main station. The clearing was full of old stumps from some logging operation that had been there long before us. Stumps bleached out and pale, and every afternoon the mosquitoes came up so thick you had to keep moving or they'd just settle on you. That was the setup. Me and Miller and Torres, and we'd been out there maybe 5 days before anything happened. The first thing was my toothbrush. I kept it in a mesh pocket on the outside of my wash bag. I'm particular about that. Not weird about it, just particular. And one evening I went to brush my teeth and it wasn't there. It was on the cooking crate, standing upright in a tin cup we used for measuring. I didn't say anything. I thought I'd put it there myself and forgotten. That happens. You're tired, you're moving automatically. Things end up places. Miller said that when I mentioned it. He said, "Yeah, you probably just forgot." I said, "Probably." Then about 2 days later, Torres found his socks. Torres is the guy who camped to my left. He and I had done the same trail section for most of the job, so I knew him a little. He kept his stuff neat, neater than Miller and me. And he came back from trail work one afternoon and just stood at the edge of camp not moving. And I looked over and all his socks were clipped to a line. A line none of us had strung. It was tied between 2 of the pale stumps, his socks hanging from it in pairs, clipped upside down, and the spacing between each pair was the same. Like even. Not approximately, even the way you do it if you had a ruler. We didn't have a ruler. Nobody laughed. Miller made a noise like he was going to say something and then didn't. Torres took them down and didn't talk about it that night, and we didn't push it. After that, we started taking pictures in the morning before we left. Miller's idea. He had his phone and he'd do a slow pan of the whole camp, the tents, the cooking area, the chairs, all of it. We were joking about it at first, saying things like, okay, smile for the security camera and whatever. By the second day of doing it, we weren't joking. We ate dinner and passed his phone around looking at the pictures from that morning against what the camp looked like now. The folding chair. One of the 3 camp chairs we had. It was rotated about 10 degrees in the photo versus how it was when we got back. Not moved, just rotated. If you looked at the shadow it cast in the morning picture and then looked at where it was sitting now, it was off. Maybe 10 degrees, maybe a little more. The tent stakes, someone had cleaned them. We'd push them into the ground and there's always dirt packed around the heads, and when we got back they were clean. Not pulled out. Still in the same holes. Just clean. My sleeping bag. I don't roll it tight. I never have. I stuff it. There's a difference, and if you've done any camping you know what I mean. When I came back Thursday morning it was rolled. Tightly, evenly, and cinched with the drawstring looped in a specific way I don't do. We talked about whether it was someone from the main station messing with us. We went through names. There were people there who would do something like the socks, something like that, as a prank. But the sleeping bag didn't feel like a prank. The stakes didn't feel like a prank. And none of them had been out this way. The crew lead would have known. We thought about animals. Not seriously. Animals don't rotate folding chairs 10 degrees. Thursday afternoon, there was a lightning cell moving in over the ridge, and they pulled us off the trail early. We came back to camp maybe 2 hours before we normally would have. And from about 50 feet out, I could see something on the cooler. The cooler was a big blue one we kept in the center of camp, and there was something yellow sitting on top of it. It was my legal pad. I used it to track mileage on the trail sections. It had my notes in it, dates and distances and blowdown markers. I kept it in the map pocket of my pack, and my pack was in my tent. Not out. In my tent, zipped up. The pad was sitting on the cooler and every page had been written on. I want to be specific about this. It was a 50-page legal pad, and I had used maybe 8 pages for notes. The other 42 pages and also the backs of the 8 pages I'd used, all of it, every line on every page, edge to edge, had been written on in block letters. The same sentence repeated from the top of the first page to the bottom of the last one. Not your campsite. That's what it said. In block letters, all caps. No variation in the size or spacing of the letters. Every line on every page. The rain started before we finished reading it. Not hard at first, just the first drops coming in ahead of the cell. We were standing there with the pad, and Miller turned through the pages and Torres was looking at the treeline, and I was trying to think if I had any explanation at all for what I was looking at. Then from uphill, from somewhere in the trees behind where our tents were, we heard someone cough. Not a small cough. A wet one, the kind where you put your hand over your mouth. One cough and then quiet. The trees uphill from us were dense and the light was already going because of the storm, and I looked up there for a long time and I didn't see anything move. We broke camp that night. I want to be clear that we didn't talk about it for very long. Miller said we're going and Torres said yeah, and I started pulling stakes. We had headlamps and we worked in the rain, and we had everything in the truck in about 40 minutes. We drove to the main station and slept in the truck, and in the morning Miller talked to the crew lead and said there had been an incident at the campsite, and the crew lead asked what kind of incident, and Miller said someone had been coming into our camp during the day and going through our stuff, and the crew lead asked if anything had been taken. Nothing had been taken. That's the thing I keep coming back to. 42 pages of the same sentence, and someone cleaning the mud off tent stakes and rolling my sleeping bag tighter than I ever do, and nothing taken. Not food, not gear, not anything. The crew lead filed something with the Forestry Service. Whether anyone went up there to look, I don't know. We finished out the job staying at the main station, and they crowded us into the cabins. Nobody said anything was ever found. No one was ever identified. I looked up how long it takes to write 42 pages of block letters edge to edge. I sat down with a legal pad and tried it for 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, I got through about a page and a half going at a steady pace. 42 pages would have taken a long time. Hours. That's a long time to sit in someone's camp writing the same sentence. Torres and I traded numbers before we drove out at the end of the season. He texted me in September asking if I'd heard anything, and I said no, and he said okay, and that was the last time we talked about it. I don't know what the cough means in relation to the rest of it. I don't know if it was one person who'd been coming into camp or more than one. I don't know how they got in and out without us seeing tracks or anything disturbed on the edges of the clearing. I don't know why the socks were clipped upside down specifically or what that was about. I haven't done seasonal forestry work since then. I do other work now. That's not why, or it's not the only reason. But I think about the legal pad sometimes. The way every page was full to the edges. Whoever did that, they were patient. They were there a long time. Derek lost his job in October, and by November he had bought a tent. That is the order it happened in. The tent came from a retired park ranger, some listing online, huge canvas thing, green, old. It smelled like mildew and old smoke, and we aired it out in the backyard for 2 weeks and it still smelled like that. Derek said it had character. That was the kind of thing he was saying a lot that month. Derek is my husband. I don't know what word to use right now. We have 2 boys, Marcus and Eli. They were 9 and 11 at the time. This was November 2016, northern Minnesota, about 4 hours north of where we lived then. The trip was Derek's idea, and I want to be accurate about how he sold it. He did not ask. He told us at dinner one night that we were going, that we needed real experiences, that the boys were spending too much time on devices. He said it like he had been thinking about it for a while and had landed somewhere firm. Marcus and Eli were excited because they were kids and it sounded like an adventure. I did not say what I thought about it at the dinner table. I want to back up because there is something you need to know about October. Derek had not told me right away that he lost the job. I found out because I went to move money between accounts online and the direct deposit from his company had stopped 2 weeks before that. When I asked him, he said he had been meaning to tell me. He said it calmly. He said there had been some issues at work and it was better this way and he was already looking. He did not tell me what the issues were. I asked twice and both times he said it was complicated and he would explain it later. He never did. So that is the background on Derek going into the trip. We drove up on a Friday. Derek drove the whole way and did not want the radio on, which was not normal for him. He said he wanted to think. The boys had headphones on in the back and I watched the highway, and at some point I noticed Derek checking the mirrors. Not once, repeatedly. The way you check mirrors when you are watching for a specific thing rather than just keeping track of traffic. I did not say anything about it. The campground was almost empty. There had been early snow and most of the sites were closed. There was one RV at the far end with a light on inside and a sticker on the back window, retired couple from the look of the lawn chairs outside, and that was it. The ranger booth was unstaffed, just a self-pay box. Derek had exact change ready in his shirt pocket. He set up the tent and he was cheerful about it in a way that I kept noticing. Too much explaining things to the boys about how the poles worked. A lot of whistling. He made a joke about 3 or 4 times that wasn't that funny the first time, and the boys laughed anyway, and he seemed to need them to laugh. It was like watching someone perform at being in a good mood. I had seen Derek in actual good moods, and it did not look like this. I was getting the sleeping bags out of the truck when I saw him take the license plates off. Both of them, front and back. He used a screwdriver from the toolbox he kept behind the seat. He folded each plate into a moving blanket, the gray padded kind, and slid the whole thing under the back seat. I stood there with the sleeping bags. He saw me and said it was to stop theft, that people steal plates at remote campgrounds. He had read about it. He said it like it was a normal thing he had looked up. I did not say anything right then because Marcus was right there asking me something about whether we could do a fire. Later, I tried to remember if I had ever heard of people stealing license plates at campgrounds. I could not think of a single time I had heard that. After dinner, the boys played cards by the lantern inside the tent. Derek sat with them for a while, and then he said he was going to check the perimeter, which was a word he used, perimeter, like that was a normal camping word. He stepped out. He came back maybe 20 minutes later. He sat down and then got up again a little while after and went out again. He did this probably 4 or 5 times over the course of the evening, and every time the boys asked where he was going, he said just checking on things or getting some air. The last time he came back in, there was snow on his boots up past the ankle. Wet snow clinging to the laces and the lower part of his jeans. He had been somewhere off the gravel, somewhere in the trees, to get that much snow on him. He did not explain it. He sat down next to me on the cot, and the boys were still focused on their cards, and he leaned toward me and asked, quietly, whether I had told anyone where we were going. He said it the way you ask someone to pass the salt. Even, just a question. He was looking at the lantern when he asked it, not at me. I said I had mentioned it to my sister, just that we were going camping up north, not the specific campground. He nodded. He said okay. He did not ask anything else about it. I want to say that again because I have thought about the way he asked it a lot. He was not accusing me of anything. He was not upset. He was asking the way you ask something you actually need to know the answer to. My sister. She lives in Duluth. I had texted her Thursday night, said we were doing a camping thing with the boys. Said where approximately. I had her address in my phone, her number. That is the only reason I am saying this part. We sat there for a while. The boys were getting tired, and I was about to tell them to start getting ready for sleep when headlights came through the trees. Not from the road into the campground. From somewhere back behind the tree line to the north. They swept across the canvas of the tent, slow, like a car turning, and then they were gone. Derek was off the cot before I fully understood what I had seen. He went to the corner of the tent, the far corner away from the door, and he crouched down and reached under the cot frame there and pulled something out. Long wrapped in a towel. One of our kitchen towels, the green ones. I recognized it. I had not seen him pack it. I had helped pack the truck. I had not seen it go in. He held it with both hands and he stayed crouched and he looked at the tent door and he was very still. The boys had stopped playing cards. Eli was watching Derek. Marcus was watching me. The headlights did not come back. We stayed like that for a while, I don't know how long. And then Derek put the thing back under the cot and stood up and told the boys it was time for sleep. Cheerful again, just like that, the whistling version of himself. He helped Eli get into his sleeping bag. He told a joke. Marcus asked what was in the towel and Derek said it was a surprise for tomorrow. Something he had packed for them. And Marcus accepted that because he was 9 and Derek was his dad. I lay there after the boys were asleep and Derek was on the cot next to me, and I looked at the canvas ceiling and I thought about whether I was going to ask him about the towel. I decided I was going to. I turned toward him and he was already asleep, or he looked asleep. Eyes closed. Breathing slow. I did not sleep. I watched the ceiling and listened to the wind, and around 2 in the morning a car came into the campground on the actual road, drove through slowly, and left again. I heard the tires on the gravel and then the sound going away. Derek did not wake up, or he did not move. In the morning he made eggs on the camp stove and the boys were happy, and there was new snow on everything and it looked nice. Eli caught Derek's mood, the real one, not the performed one, and he started asking when we could go home. Derek said we would pack up after lunch. We did. He put the plates back on in the parking area before we pulled out, and I watched him do it, and he saw me watching, and he said he had read later that the theft thing was mostly an urban legend. He said it just like that, like it was a fact he had looked up, like there was nothing strange about any of it. We drove home and the boys fell asleep in the back, and I watched Derek check the mirrors for the first 2 hours and then he stopped. I do not know when he stopped because at some point I was watching the road instead. I moved the green towels to a different cabinet when we got home. The ones from the kitchen. I bought new ones. I told myself I was just reorganizing. The thing that had been in the towel, I never found it in the house. I looked, not all at once. Over a few weeks, I went through the places it could be. Garage, attic, the storage boxes in the basement. I did not find anything. I did not ask Derek about the job again. He started doing some freelance work and then got another position in the spring, and things went back to mostly normal, and I kept thinking there would be a right time to bring up the camping trip, to ask him about the license plates or about who might have been in those woods or what he thought he needed to reach for when those headlights came through. But there was never a right time, and then enough time passed that it started to seem like something I might have made too big in my head. Except I did not make up the towel. I did not make up him crouching in the corner of that tent holding something in both hands while our boys sat there. I don't know what I thought I was going to find out by telling you all this. I guess I just wanted to say it to someone who wasn't there. The sleep thing had been going on for maybe 8 months before the trip. That is the part you need to know first. I was not sleeping right. Not insomnia exactly, more like I would fall asleep and then be awake at 2 or 3 in the morning for no reason, just sitting up in bed in the apartment with no memory of having woken up. Claire, my girlfriend, she thought a weekend without phones would help. She found a campground on the Oregon coast, late October, off-season rates, nobody else around. She booked it before I could say anything about it either way. We drove out on a Friday after she got off work. The campground was on a bluff over the ocean. Volcanic rock down below, maybe 30 feet, and the water. The sound from the ocean there was not what I expected. It was not waves really. It was more like if you left a highway on in the background of a room. Constant. Not loud but always there. The sights were gravel and there were fire rings and then the drop to the rocks. There was a rope fence at the edge, but it was one of those decorative ones, the kind that would not stop anything. We set up the tent and made food on the little camp stove, and Claire fell asleep probably within 20 minutes of getting in the sleeping bag. She has always been able to do that. I lay there listening to the ocean noise for a long time. I do not know when I fell asleep that first night, but in the morning my socks were damp. Not soaked through, just damp around the ankles. I took them off and put them on the tent flap to dry and did not say anything about it. I thought condensation, I thought I had been sweating. Something like that. The tent was cheap and we had not put the rainfly on right. The second morning there was sand in my sleeping bag. Not at the bottom, not near my feet. Up near the chest zipper. I sat there for a minute looking at it. I thought about how it could have gotten there. I did not come up with anything. I brushed it out into the gravel and did not say anything about that either. That second morning Claire said, while she was making coffee, she said, "Did you go outside last night?" I said no. She had one of those metal camping cups and she was stirring the instant coffee in it and the spoon kept scraping the bottom. She said she had heard me at around 3. She said it sounded like I was walking around out there on the gravel. I said I didn't. I said I was in the sleeping bag the whole night. She laughed. She stirred the coffee. She said okay. The way she said it made it clear she did not think I was telling the truth. But she was not going to push it. I want to be clear that I did not have any memory of going outside either night. Not a fragment of one. Not a dream about it. Nothing. The third night I was not going to sleep. I had decided that. I lay there with my eyes open and I was watching the top of the tent and listening to Claire breathe and listening to the ocean doing that highway sound. And at some point I thought I should do something to make sure I would know if I got up. I had a carabiner on my pack. I put it through both zipper pulls on the tent door so that you would have to physically remove it to get out. I remember doing it. I remember lying back down after and looking at the tent ceiling. Then I was cold. That is the next thing. There was no middle part. I was lying there looking at the tent ceiling and then I was cold and the tent was open. The flap was pushed back. The carabiner was not on the zipper. I sat up and looked for it. It was not near the door. I found it later. It was on the ground outside about 4 feet from the tent. Claire was still asleep. She was facing the tent wall, away from the door, and I could hear her breathing, even and slow. I was sitting there in the open tent door and I could smell the ocean. There was something else too, something under it. I do not know how to describe it except that it reminded me of the smell inside a car that has been parked in the sun a long time. Metallic, almost, not strong, just present. I sat there, and then I heard footsteps on the gravel. Not close, out past the fire ring, past the edge of the site. Slow, spaced out. I sat there and I did not move, and every time I shifted my weight on the sleeping pad, the footsteps out there shifted too. Not immediately. Close. Like when you talk in a big empty building and you hear it come back at you, but off. The timing was close enough that I kept thinking I had imagined it. I would be still and then I would hear one more after me. And then nothing until I moved again. I did not get up. I sat in the tent door for a while. I do not know how long. The ocean kept making its sound. Then Claire said something. She said it quietly, not like she was talking to me. More like talking in her sleep or talking to the wall. She did not move or turn over. She said, "You did that voice again." I said, "What?" She did not answer. Her breathing stayed the same, even like she was still asleep. I said, "Claire, Nothing. In the morning, she did not bring it up. I waited for her to. She made coffee and she sat on the camp chair and she looked at the water down below and she did not say anything about the night. I asked her if she remembered saying something and she looked at me and she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "In the night, you said something." She said she didn't remember. She said she sleeps hard. I knew that. She said it like I was making it into something. I did not bring up the carabiner. I found it in the gravel when I was packing the site and I put it in my pocket and did not say anything. We packed up and drove home that Sunday and she played music and we talked about other things, what we needed from the store, a thing happening with her job. Normal. I kept thinking I would find a way to say the thing about the footsteps, or the way she had said that sentence, but every time I started to get there I could not figure out what I was actually going to say. What was the question I was asking? I did not know. The sleep thing did not get better after we got back. That is not part of the story, I guess, but it is true. I looked up the campground later, not for any specific reason, just looked at it online. There were reviews, normal stuff. One of them from a few years before mentioned not camping there in the off-season. It did not say why. That was the whole thing it said about it. I clicked on the person's profile and they did not have any other reviews. I don't know why I'm mentioning that. I guess because I looked at it a few times. The voice thing, I thought about that a lot. You did that voice again. Not you were doing a voice or you made a weird sound. Again, like it had happened before and she knew what it was and was tired of it. But she didn't remember saying it and there was no other time that would have happened. There was no first time, and I could not figure out a way to ask her about it without saying I had been awake and heard her say it, which would get back to the question of why I was awake and whether I had been outside, and I didn't have an answer for that. The socks. The sand in the sleeping bag up near my chest. The footsteps in the gravel timing themselves to me. The carabiner on the ground outside. I have gone through these things a lot. I can see how each one of them could be something. Condensation. I tracked sand in myself without noticing. Sound carries funny off water and gravel. I put the carabiner down when I was half asleep and forgot. All of that is possible. It's possible. Claire and I broke up about 4 months later. Nothing to do with this, different reasons. I don't talk to her now. I thought about reaching out once to ask about the voice thing, but I didn't. The sleep stuff is better now. Not great, but better. I don't go camping. My brother and I were doing a javelina survey for a wildlife management class, and we were camped above a dry riverbed in southern Arizona. February. My brother's name is Colt. He's 2 years younger than me, and he'd taken the same class a semester behind me, so we signed up for the same survey section so we could share the drive down. Our gear had gotten wet earlier that week, legitimately wet, like soaked through wet, because we camped near a drainage and it rained hard 2 nights before. So we borrowed canvas tents from the college. Old ones, heavy, the kind with the aluminum poles that don't quite fit right anymore because someone bent one of them and tried to straighten it. We got them from the equipment room and the guy working the desk said they were fine. They smelled like mildew and something else I couldn't name, but I figured that was just storage. We set up on a flat shelf of ground above the wash. The riverbed was below us maybe 30, 40 feet. Dry. It had been dry for a while, you could tell. The sand had that settled look. We were supposed to be doing dawn and dusk counts, so we'd eat and sleep and be up before light. That was the plan. The wind came off the rocks after sunset and it was hot, which still surprises me when I think about it because it was February and I expected cold nights, but it was that desert wind that carries dust in it and dries out your mouth. Colt made conchili on a camp stove that kept cutting out because of the sand getting into it somehow. We ate. We talked about the survey, about a girl he was seeing back at school, about whether the truck needed new tires. Normal stuff. We went to bed around 9 because we had to be up at 4:30. Colt talks in his sleep. Has since we were kids. Not full sentences, just pieces of things. I've shared tents with him before, so I know how it sounds. It goes on for a while after he falls asleep, and then it stops and then sometimes starts again. I can usually tune it out. That night I woke up around 2 and he had stopped talking. I noticed it the way you notice when a fan shuts off in a room. The absence of it. He wasn't awake. I could hear him breathing. He just wasn't making the half-word sounds anymore. I don't know why I'm telling you that first, except that I noticed it first before anything else, so I guess that's where it starts. The tent fabric was snapping in the wind. That canvas pops when the wind hits it, loud, and I was lying there listening to it and I heard something outside. Stones moving, not rolling, not a rock slide, but shifting. The weight on gravel sound. Slow and spaced out, like something coming downhill and placing its feet carefully. My first thought was cattle. There were ranch fences maybe 3 miles back and cattle get out, that's not unusual, and big cattle on rocky ground sound heavy. That's what I told myself. I lay there and listened and it kept coming down toward the wash. Then it stepped onto the riverbed. I'm telling you, the sound changed. I don't know how else to say it. When it hit the sand of the wash, it was different than it had been on the rock. It was lower. I want to say hollow, but that's not quite it. Like the sound had more space under it somehow. The first step, and then a second one, and then nothing for long enough that I thought maybe it had stopped or moved off somewhere I couldn't hear. Then nothing for a long time. I unzipped the tent. Just a couple inches. The zipper on those old canvas tents is loud. I went slow. I could see out through the gap. Moonlight was hitting the wash and it was bright enough that I could see the mesquite down there and our gear pile and the other tent, Colt's tent, which was set up about 15 feet from mine. There was nothing in the wash that I could see. There were shadows from the mesquite and from the rocks on the far bank. I looked at the gear pile because it was the biggest thing down there and I was looking for something next to it or behind it. Nothing. Just the gear. Then one of the shadows moved. Not all of it. Part of it. And it moved uphill, which was wrong, because the moon was where it was and shadows don't move uphill toward the light source. I know what I'm saying sounds like I'm describing something that doesn't make sense, and I understand that. I'm telling you what I saw. It moved fast. I want to be careful about the word fast because it wasn't running. It wasn't the way something runs. It was more like it covered ground in long, low movements, like it was pulling itself forward rather than pushing off. I only saw it for maybe 2 or 3 seconds before it was up the bank and out of the moonlight. Out of the moonlight and closer to the tents. I did not move. I was still on my side with the zipper pulled 2 inches open and I did not move. I was listening for it, and for a moment I couldn't hear anything over the tent fabric and the wind, and then I could hear something just outside. Not footsteps on rock anymore. Something on the ground right there, on the dirt, close enough that the sound of it was different from the wind. Something exhaled. I'm telling you, it exhaled hard, 1 breath out, and through that 2-inch gap in the zipper I could smell it. I could smell rot. Not like a dead animal on the road. Not that exact smell. But something in that direction. And wet dirt. Both of those things at once. Colt's tent went flat. That's the only way I know how to say it. The whole thing went flat sideways all at once. Like the air came out of it, like it just folded. No scream. No sound from Colt at all. No cursing, no oh God, nothing. Just the canvas flattening in one motion and then stillness. I did not unzip the tent further. I did not go out. I want to be clear about that because I've thought about it since and I don't know what I would say to explain why I didn't. I just didn't. I lay there with the zipper open 2 inches and I listened, and there was the wind and the tent fabric and nothing else. After a while, I don't know how long, I heard Colt. He made a sound, not words, just a sound people make when they're waking up confused. His tent was still flat. I could see the shape of it. He started moving around underneath it, and then he found the zipper from inside and got out. He stood up. He looked at his tent. He looked over at my tent. He said my name. I said yeah. He said his tent fell. I said yeah, I know. He said, did you hear that? I said yeah. He came over and got in my tent and we zipped it, and neither of us said anything else until it started getting light. When it got light enough, we went out and looked around. The second tent's main pole had come out of the fitting. That can happen with those old poles. The fitting was already loose and the wind could have done it. That's possible. I'm not saying that's not possible. We didn't find tracks. The ground up on the shelf was too hard for tracks, and the riverbed sand had been disturbed, but it's a wash. Sand moves. I went down into the wash and walked it for a while. I was looking for, I don't know what I was looking for. Something that would tell me what size it was. I didn't find anything that told me that. We did the 4:30 count. We packed up. We drove back to campus and returned the tents, and I told the guy at the desk that one of the pole fittings was loose. He said okay and wrote it down. Colt asked me about it once, maybe a month later. He said, do you know what that was? I said no. He said, do you think it was a bear? I said there are black bears in the Chiricahuas, but we weren't in the Chiricahuas, and I'd never heard of one in that area, and I didn't say bear because I didn't think it was a bear. I said I don't know what it was. He said okay, and we didn't talk about it after that. I've looked up what's in that part of Arizona. I've looked up what's big enough to make that kind of sound on rock. I've looked up what kind of thing moves the way I described, that low pulling motion. I haven't found anything that matches it exactly. I'm not saying there's nothing that matches it. I'm saying I haven't found it. The smell is the thing I come back to. The rot and the wet dirt. I've been outside a lot since then. I've smelled dead things. I've smelled wet desert after rain. I've smelled a lot of things. I haven't smelled that combination again. I don't know what made that smell. I don't know what was outside the tent. That's all I have on it. So this was about 3 weeks after the divorce finalized. I was driving from Lexington up to Bloomington because that's where my sister lived, and I figured I'd stay with her until I got sorted out. I had the car packed with whatever fit. The rest went into a storage unit off New Circle Road. My dog Hank was in the back seat. He's a beagle. He was about 9 at the time. I mention him because he matters later. I was sleeping in campgrounds instead of motels because I was trying to hold on to money. The lawyers had taken a lot of it and I wasn't working yet, just moving. So I had the tent and a sleeping pad, and I'd been doing that for about 4 nights by the time I got to the one I want to tell you about. It was a county campground off Route 15, somewhere past Hazard. I'd looked it up on my phone because it showed up as cheap and I didn't want to drive any further that day. $5 a night, cash drop box at the entrance. I pulled in around 5 in the afternoon, maybe 5:30. There were maybe 4 other sites being used. It wasn't a busy place. A family at the far end with a couple of kids. A pickup truck with a camper shell that I never saw anyone come out of. And then this RV parked one site over from where I set up. White RV, older. One of those medium-length ones, not huge. There was a man outside it when I pulled in. He was maybe 60, heavy-set. He had a push broom and he was sweeping the gravel pad in front of his RV. I noticed him because he stopped when I pulled up and watched me park. That's not unusual. People look when a car comes in. But he kept watching while I got out and started unloading. I got the tent out and Hank jumped out and found a spot to sniff around, and the man just stood there with his broom until I started setting up, and then he went back to sweeping. I got the tent up before dark. Ate something out of a can. Let Hank do his business on a long lead. At some point, the man came over to the edge of his site, not onto mine, and said something about the weather. Said rain was coming. I said, yeah, probably. He asked if that was my dog, and I said yes. He asked what kind, and I told him. He nodded and looked at Hank for a while, and then asked where I was headed. I said Indiana, and he said something like, yeah, it's a good drive from here to Indiana, or something close to that. I didn't think about it then. I was tired and I wanted to eat and I wasn't paying close attention. He asked if the Honda was mine. I said yes. He said something about Hondas being reliable. I agreed. He went back inside. The thing I keep coming back to is that I never said Indiana first. I want to be really clear about that, because later I tried to remember the sequence and I kept trying to give myself a reason to think I'd mentioned it, and I just don't think I did. He asked where I was headed and I answered him. But he used the word Indiana before I said it. That's what I remember. I figured he saw the plates. Indiana plates, that would make sense. But I was coming from Kentucky. I'd been in Kentucky for 6 years. The car had Kentucky plates. I didn't switch them yet because I wasn't registered in Indiana yet. So it wasn't the plates. I kept coming back to that and I couldn't get anywhere with it, so I just let it drop. After it got dark, I got into the tent with Hank and read on my phone for a while. The rain started sometime around 10. Just light at first, tapping on the fly. Hank had been fine all evening, but once it got fully dark, he started doing this thing where he couldn't settle. He'd lie down and then get up and turn around and lie down again. He kept smelling the air with his nose going in short little bursts. I've had him a long time. That's not how he usually sleeps. Usually once he's down, he's down. I didn't do anything about it. I told him to settle and he'd lie still for a while and then start up again. Sometime after midnight, I heard the broom. Slow scraping on the gravel. Back and forth. I remember thinking it was a strange time to be sweeping outside. It was raining. Not hard, but it was raining. I didn't get up to look. The broom sounds kept going for a while, same slow rhythm, and I just lay there listening to it. Then after a while, it was closer. I noticed it was closer because the sound changed. When he was at his own site, there was some distance and it had a certain sound. And then it had a different sound, which was it being closer. I don't know exactly how long that took. Could have been 20 minutes. Could have been 10. I unzipped the tent maybe a third of the way and looked out. Couldn't see much. The rain had fogged everything up and there was one pole light at the entrance to the campground, but it didn't reach this far in. I could hear the broom. I could not see it. I could not see him. I zipped the tent back up. Hank was standing up now, not growling, just standing and breathing through his nose. The sound moved around. That's the thing I have the most trouble explaining. It moved around to the side of the tent that faced away from the RV, which meant he had walked around behind my car to get there. There wasn't anything back there. No path, no facilities, nothing. Just my tent and then the tree line. And the broom kept going. Long, slow strokes. I had a flashlight. I picked it up. I didn't turn it on yet. I want to be clear that the strokes were not random. They were not like a person sweeping in the dark out of habit or because they couldn't sleep. They went one direction and then they came back. And they went to a certain point and stopped and came back. Like tracing something. Like the broom was marking the edge of something. I turned on the flashlight and put it against the side of the tent and just left it on so the whole tent was lit from inside. I don't know why I did that. I just did it. The broom stopped. I sat there with Hank pressed against my leg and I listened to the rain and I waited. Nothing happened for a long time. I don't know how long. The rain picked up a little and then came back down. At some point I heard the door of the RV open and close. I didn't sleep. I lay there with the flashlight on until it started getting gray outside and then I packed up everything fast. I didn't make coffee. I put Hank in the car and I broke the tent down wet and shoved it in the trunk and I left. When I pulled out, it was just barely light enough to see. I drove past the RV. The broom was leaning against it next to the door. The man wasn't outside. Here's the thing I haven't been able to account for. When I got to my sister's place in Bloomington, I had my phone on the whole drive and at some point I noticed I had a voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. Kentucky area code. I don't know when it came in. I listened to it and it was a man's voice and there was noise on the line, like wind or like he was outside, and he said my name, first and last. And then there was a pause and the message ended. That was it. I called the number back and it was disconnected. I don't know who it was. I couldn't tell from the voice. I've thought about it a lot and I couldn't tell you if it was the same man or not. I just don't know. My sister asked why I looked like that when I got there and I didn't know how to explain it, so I said I was just tired from the drive. I've looked up that campground since, trying to find it on a map, looking at the county rec department website, whatever. I can find Route 15 and I can find Hazard, but I've never been able to pin down which county run site it was. There are a few possibilities. I drove it once more, about 2 years later, going a different direction, and I couldn't find it. That probably doesn't mean anything. I was tired the night I went through and I wasn't paying attention to landmarks. Hank died in 2021. That's not related. He was just old. I still have the voicemail. I haven't listened to it again. Still in my phone. I just know it's there. We had been driving for about 11 hours when we stopped, and my daughter was 9, and she is the reason any of this matters because I would not have stopped at that campground if it had just been me. Her name is Remy. She is 12 now. She does not talk about that night, and I have not pushed it. We were on our way to see my sister in Albuquerque. I had planned the drive badly, and we hit Amarillo later than I expected, and every motel within about 20 miles was booked because of some rodeo thing I did not know about. I called maybe 8 places from a gas station parking lot while Remy ate a granola bar in the backseat. The woman at the last number I tried told me there was a campground about 4 miles east off the highway that was taking people. She said it like she was doing me a favor. I wrote down the exit number on my hand. The campground was not a real campground. That is the first thing. It was more like a field someone had put portable toilets in and called it something. Packed dirt, no shade, generators going everywhere because there were no hookups. People had crammed in close together. It was the kind of place you end up when every other option is gone. And most of the people there looked like that was exactly what had happened to them. Families, mostly. A few trucks with guys sleeping in the beds. Everyone looked tired. I paid a man in a folding chair $22. He gave me a laminated card with a site number on it and pointed generally toward the middle of the field. He did not walk us over. He was already looking at his phone. I found the site and started putting up the tent. The ground was hard, harder than I expected, and I ended up bending one of the stakes before I got it in. Remy was sitting at the picnic table that came with the site, counting the semis going by on the interstate, which you could see from where we were because there was nothing between us and it. She was doing it out loud. She got to 31 before I finished. The guy showed up around the time the sun was getting low. I did not know who he was. I want to be clear about that because later I kept trying to remember if there had been something on his shirt or his truck or anything that would have told me he worked there. And there was not. He was just a man, maybe 50, wearing jeans and a button shirt and leather work gloves, the kind you use for yard work or moving boxes. He was carrying a paper grocery sack, the handles looped over one arm. He did not say hello or introduce himself. He just crouched down next to the fire ring at the edge of our site and started doing something with the sticks that were in there, arranging them. He was putting them into these neat little bundles, tying them with something. I could not see what from where I was standing. I figured he was staff. That is the only reason I did not say anything right away. The man at the entrance had not given me any information, and I assumed there were other people who worked there doing setup things, fire safety things, whatever. He asked Remy if she liked camping. She said kind of. He asked how old she was. She told him. Then he asked her if she was a heavy sleeper. He said it just like that, out of nowhere, not as part of any other sentence. Just, "Are you a heavy sleeper?" Remy looked at me. I walked over and I told him we were all set and we were going to get some dinner going. He nodded while I was saying it, the way someone nods when they are waiting for you to stop talking. Then he stood up, picked up his grocery sack, and walked away toward the edge of the field. Before he got past the tent, he stopped and tied something to one of the poles. I saw him do it. I did not say anything because I still thought, or I was still telling myself, that he was with the campground and that it was some kind of marker or safety thing. It was a strip of orange ribbon, the kind you see on construction sites. He tied it and then kept walking and did not look back. I made dinner on the camp stove. Remy had noodles and I had the same. We did not talk about the man. After we ate, I put the trash in the bear box, even though there were no bears anywhere near Amarillo as far as I knew. But it was the only lidded container available, and I did not want anything getting into it overnight. We got in the tent around 9. Remy was asleep fast, the way she always is in the car or anywhere that isn't her bed, which I have never understood. I lay there listening to the generators and the interstate and someone 2 sites over playing music low. I do not know what time it was when I woke up. Late. The music had stopped. The generators had stopped. That was the thing that actually woke me, I think, the stopping. It had been loud enough that when it went quiet, it was a different kind of loud. I remembered the ribbon. I do not know why it came to me right then. I just thought about it and I did not want it on the tent. I unzipped the door slowly so I would not wake Remy, and I stepped out with my sandals on and I pulled the ribbon off the pole. Came off easy, just a loose tie. I held it for a second and then put it in my pocket. I looked around the site and that is when I saw them. One on each of the other 3 poles. Orange. All tied the same way. I stood there for what was probably 10 seconds. Then I went back in the tent and I sat down next to Remy without zipping it back up all the way. After a while, I picked up my flashlight. I do not remember deciding to do this. I just had it in my hand and I went back outside. The campground was quiet in a way it had not been when we arrived. Not just the generators. The interstate was quiet too, or quieter, the way it gets at 4 in the morning sometimes when there is just nothing going by for a stretch. The wind was moving dirt across the ground, little dry gusts of it. I turned the flashlight toward the other sites. The nearest 3 were empty, not like people had gone to bed. Empty like they had been vacated. The site to my left had had a blue dome tent and a folding table with a lantern on it. The tent was gone. The table was gone. The lantern was gone. The site to my right had had a truck and a family in a pop-up of some kind. The truck was gone. The pop-up was gone. I could see the compressed patches of dirt where things had been. I moved the light further out and it was the same, one after another. The sites that had been full when we went to sleep were cleared. Not all of them. There was a tent still standing maybe 150 feet away near the road, a big green one, and there was a man standing near it. He was facing toward me. I could not see his face from that distance. I could see the shape of him, the outline, and his hands were at his sides. He was not moving. I stood there with the flashlight on him. He did not move. I went back in the tent and I got my keys and my phone and I picked Remy up. She woke up partway and I told her we were getting in the car. She asked why. I said I wanted to get an early start. She believed me, or she did not have enough in her to argue, and she got in the back seat and was asleep again before I had the car started. I drove us out of there. I did not go past the man or past the green tent. There was a second entrance at the other end of the field, a gap in the low fence they had put up, and I drove through it and onto the service road and then onto the highway. We slept in a McDonald's parking lot in a town called Adrian for about 3 hours. When Remy woke up, she asked why we left the tent, and I told her I had already packed it up. She accepted that. We drove the rest of the way to my sister's that day. I went back and looked up that campground a few weeks after we got home. The name the man in the folding chair had told me. I could not find any listing for it. I found a review from a few years before about a pop-up campground that sounded like it might have been the same field. But the review was for a different name and it was not updated past 2019. I still have the ribbon, all 4 pieces. I put them in the glove box and they are still there. I do not know what to make of the other campers being gone. They could have left. People leave in the night all the time for whatever reason. The whole thing could be a lot of things. I just know we were there and now we were not, and the man was still standing in that field when I drove away, and I don't know whose tent that was he was standing next to.